My name is Aaron Williams, 67 years old, and a widower for 5 years now. After Margaret passed, I thought living in our family home of 40 years would keep her memory alive. My son Thomas was my world until Samantha came along 3 years ago. We were having a barbecue in my backyard last summer when I overheard her talking to her friend. "Aaron will be in a nursing home soon anyway," she said, not realizing I was standing right behind her. What happened next changed everything. I sold our family home and left them homeless. Before I tell you what happened after that, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. I spent most of my life as a construction manager, building homes for other families, while putting every spare dollar into creating the perfect life for my own. Margaret and I purchased our colonial-style house in a quiet suburban neighborhood back in 1980. It needed work, but I had the skills and determination to transform it into something special. Over 4 decades, that house became the backdrop for every important moment in our lives. We raised our only son Thomas there. I can still picture him taking his first steps across the living room hardwood floors I had installed myself. Each summer, I built a new addition to his treehouse in the backyard oak tree, until it became a neighborhood legend. Margaret created a beautiful garden that bloomed from early spring through late fall, with colors that matched her vibrant personality. Margaret was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer 6 years ago. Those final months were difficult as I watched my vivacious wife grow weaker daily. Before she passed, she made me promise 2 things: to take care of Thomas and to keep our family close. I intended to honor both promises. After Margaret died, the house felt painfully empty. Thomas would visit weekly for Sunday dinners, a tradition his mother had established. He worked as an account manager at a marketing firm downtown, and I was proud of the responsible man he had become. When he mentioned meeting someone special at work, I was genuinely happy for him. Samantha was attractive and ambitious. During their first visit together, she complimented the house, but followed each positive comment with suggestions for modernizing various features. I smiled politely, not wanting to seem like a stubborn old man resistant to change. Thomas seemed completely captivated by her, hanging on her every word and seeking her approval with his eyes. 6 months into their relationship, Thomas called with news. "Dad, Samantha and I are thinking about moving in together, but rent downtown is outrageous. Would you mind if we stayed with you for a few months while we save for a down payment on our own place?" How could I refuse my only child? The house had 4 bedrooms and just 1 occupant. Having family around might ease my loneliness. "Of course," I told him. "Your mother would have wanted that." Within days of their arrival, subtle changes began. Samantha rearranged furniture without asking, explaining, "This layout makes much more sense, Aaron." She referred to me by my first name, despite my old-fashioned preference for Mr. Williams, until we knew each other better. Family photos that had adorned the mantel for years were relocated to a hallway cabinet, replaced by modern art pieces that meant nothing to me. "This place needs a woman's touch," she would say whenever I questioned these changes. Thomas would just shrug apologetically but never contradicted her. Meals became another battleground. I enjoyed cooking and had planned to prepare family dinners, but Samantha quickly took over the kitchen. "Your cholesterol must be through the roof with all that butter you use," she would comment, replacing my comfort food recipes with bland, health-conscious alternatives that left me sneaking sandwiches in my bedroom later. Despite my advancing age, I remained quite active. 3 times weekly, I attended a senior fitness class at the community center. I volunteered at the local veterans hospital, played golf with friends every Thursday, and maintained my own home repairs. My doctor consistently gave me excellent health reports, often commenting that I had the vitality of someone 20 years younger. None of this seemed to matter to Samantha. She began leaving brochures for assisted living facilities on the coffee table. When I mentioned plans to replace the roof myself, she laughed. "Should you really be climbing ladders at your age, Aaron? What if you fall and break your hip?" Thomas, who once proudly worked alongside me on house projects, now echoed her concerns. "Maybe we should hire someone, Dad. Samantha's right about the risks. The temporary arrangement stretched from months into years. Whenever I gently inquired about their house hunting progress, excuses materialized. The market was too competitive. Interest rates needed to drop. They wanted to save more for a proper down payment. Meanwhile, they expanded their occupation from the guest bedroom to Thomas's old room, converting it into Samantha's home office. I began feeling like a guest in my own home, retreating to my bedroom or workshop to avoid confrontation. Thomas and I barely spoke alone anymore, with Samantha always inserting herself between us. My son's eyes, once warm and engaging when looking at me, now often held pity or impatience. My closest friend Frank noticed the change during his visits. "Aaron, you seem different. Everything okay with the new living arrangement?" I deflected his concerns, unwilling to admit that my son and his partner were slowly pushing me to the margins of my own life. Last summer marked my 67th birthday. I decided to host a barbecue, inviting neighbors and friends who had supported me after Margaret's passing. Cooking outdoors had always been my specialty, and I looked forward to preparing my famous slow-smoked ribs and homemade sauce. 2 days before the event, Samantha announced she had improved my plans. I invited some of our friends from work, and I ordered gourmet catering. "Your recipes are charming, Aaron, but we want to make a good impression." Thomas stood beside her, nodding in agreement. I swallowed my disappointment and reminded myself that compromise was part of family life. What I didn't realize was that this barbecue would become the turning point in our relationship, forcing me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and self-respect. The morning of the barbecue arrived with perfect weather, a gentle breeze tempering the July heat. I woke early, excited despite the changes to my original plans. This would be the first large gathering at the house since Margaret passed, and I wanted everything to be perfect. By 8 o'clock, I had cleaned the patio furniture, swept the deck, and arranged the yard games that neighborhood children always enjoyed at our parties. The caterers Samantha hired weren't scheduled to arrive until noon, so I decided to prepare a few of my special dishes anyway. Margaret's potato salad recipe and my homemade coleslaw were traditions guests always expected. Samantha emerged from her bedroom around 10, coffee mug in hand, and surveyed my morning's work with a critical eye. "The tables need to be rearranged," she declared. "And those yard games are taking up space we need for mingling." Thomas appeared behind her, already nodding in agreement before assessing the situation himself. "Samantha has experience planning corporate events, Dad. Maybe we should let her handle the setup." I stepped back, hands raised in surrender, and watched as they dismantled my careful preparations. The yard games were stored away, and the simple, welcoming arrangement I had created was transformed into something resembling a magazine photo shoot. Beautiful but impersonal, guests began arriving at 2 o'clock. My longtime neighbors, the Hendersons and the Patels, brought homemade dishes despite the catering. "We wouldn't dream of coming to Aaron's without contributing," Mrs. Henderson insisted, placing her famous apple pie on the dessert table. Frank arrived with his wife Judith, giving me a hearty bear hug. "Happy birthday, old friend," he said, pressing a gift into my hands. 67 looks good on you." The atmosphere was initially warm and festive. The caterers had indeed provided excellent food, though several guests asked about my absent barbecue specialties. I noticed a clear division, forming as the afternoon progressed. My friends clustered near the old oak tree, sharing memories and updates on their grandchildren, while Thomas and Samantha entertained their younger colleagues near the house. By 4 o'clock, the party was in full swing. I was engaged in conversation with my former coworker Robert when I decided to fetch another drink from the cooler near the patio. As I approached, I overheard Samantha speaking to a woman I didn't recognize. They stood partially concealed by the large hydrangea bush Margaret had planted years ago. "The house has good bones, but the decor is so outdated," Samantha was saying. "We've been making changes gradually, but it's challenging with Aaron still here." "It must be difficult living with your father-in-law," her friend replied sympathetically. "You have no idea. Everything takes twice as long because we have to consider his feelings about every little change. He's becoming more of a burden each month." I froze, the conversation washing over me like ice water. A burden? In my own home? Have you and Thomas discussed other arrangements for him? The friend asked. Samantha lowered her voice. But not enough. We've been researching some nice assisted living facilities. He's still active now, but that could change quickly at his age. Better to be prepared. Something inside me snapped. I stepped around the hydrangea. Drink forgotten. Excuse me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I couldn't help overhearing your conversation about my future. Samantha's eyes widened in momentary shock before she composed herself. Aaron, we were just discussing options. Thinking ahead is responsible planning. It sounds like you're planning my exit from my own home, I replied. Her friend looked uncomfortable, mumbling something about checking the dessert table before hurrying away. Several nearby guests had fallen silent, attention drawn to our conversation. Samantha straightened her shoulders, seemingly emboldened by the audience. Let's be honest, Aaron. You'll be in a nursing home soon anyway. We're just being practical about the inevitable. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Conversations around us ceased entirely. I felt dozens of eyes turn our way, including Thomas's, who had approached from behind me. Samantha, he said weakly, that's not what we discussed. She turned to him, eyebrows raised. It's exactly what we discussed, just not in those words. Your father deserves to know our concerns. Concerns? I repeated, looking directly at my son. About my health? Or about how quickly you can claim this house? Thomas's face flushed. Dad, it's not like that. We're thinking about your well-being. My well-being has never been better, I stated firmly. My doctor gave me a clean bill of health last month, as you know. Samantha waved dismissively. That can change overnight at your age. Frank stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. I'm 72 and still running 5 miles daily, he interjected. Age is just a number, young lady. Samantha's face hardened. This is a family matter, she said coldly. Yes, it is, I agreed. And I'm apparently the only family member here who remembers what that word means. The party atmosphere had evaporated completely. Neighbors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mrs. Patel approached with a gentle smile, touching my arm. Aaron, perhaps I could help serve the cake now? Celebrate your special day properly. I appreciated her attempt to diffuse the situation. Thank you, Lakshmi. That would be wonderful. As guests gathered around the cake table, conversation gradually resumed, though notably subdued. Thomas avoided my eyes for the remainder of the party, while Samantha maintained a frigid politeness that fooled no one. By 6 o'clock, people began making excuses to leave. Each departing guest hugged me with extra warmth, several whispering encouragement or offering assistance should I need it. Frank was the last to leave, pulling me aside at the door. That was rough, he said quietly. Call me tomorrow. We'll talk. After everyone left, Thomas and Samantha disappeared upstairs without helping clean up. I moved mechanically through the yard, gathering plates and cups, my mind replaying Samantha's words on endless loop. You'll be in a nursing home soon anyway. The casual cruelty stunned me, but even more shocking was Thomas's weak response. The son I raised, the boy who once stood up to playground bullies defending smaller children, couldn't find the courage to properly defend his own father. As darkness fell, I sat alone on the patio swing Margaret, and I had often shared, staring at the stars emerging above. For the first time since her death, I was grateful she wasn't here to witness our son's transformation. This house, once filled with love and laughter, now felt like contested territory rather than a home. I had always believed family meant unconditional support and respect. Today had shown me a harsh reality. In Thomas and Samantha's eyes, I was no longer the patriarch of this family, but an inconvenient obstacle to their plans. As midnight approached, I made a decision. If they saw me as a burden to be managed rather than family to be treasured, perhaps it was time to reconsider everything about our arrangement. The house suddenly felt suffocating, each room haunted not by Margaret's absence, but by the painful awareness of my son's betrayal. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter. I just didn't know yet what story it would tell. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake in the bedroom Margaret and I had shared for 40 years, staring at the ceiling fan we'd installed together during a particularly hot summer in 1993. Each slow rotation seemed to hypnotize me into deeper reflection about how I had arrived at this crossroads. My mind drifted back to 1978, when Margaret and I first saw this house. We were young and ambitious, with a 2-year-old Thomas balanced on my hip as we toured the property. The house needed significant work: outdated wiring, a leaking roof, ancient plumbing. The real estate agent had apologetically called it a handyman special, not realizing he was speaking to a man who viewed such challenges as opportunities. "We can't afford this," Margaret had whispered as we stood in the overgrown backyard. "We can if I take on extra shifts and do all the renovations myself," I'd replied, already envisioning what this neglected property could become. For 3 years, I worked 60-hour weeks at my construction job, then spent evenings and weekends transforming our house room by room. Margaret took part-time work as a school secretary to help with expenses. We sacrificed vacations, new clothes, and dinners out, pouring every spare dollar into building our dream home. I remembered the bone-deep exhaustion of those years, falling into bed with hands raw from labor, only to rise before dawn and do it all again. But alongside that exhaustion lived a profound sense of purpose. Every repair, every improvement, was an investment in our family's future. Thomas's childhood unfolded against the backdrop of this ongoing project. As a toddler, he handed me nails with serious concentration. By 10, he was helping install drywall. Through his teenage years, he complained about weekend work when friends were at the mall, but I believe he absorbed valuable lessons about determination and craftsmanship. When Thomas was accepted to State University, Margaret and I exchanged worried glances over the tuition bill. Our modest savings wouldn't cover 4 years of education. Without hesitation, I postponed my planned workshop addition and took a second job supervising night construction on the new hospital. Margaret increased her hours at school. We sold our second car. "Your education is the most important investment we'll ever make," I told Thomas when he expressed concern about the sacrifices. "This is what family does for each other." He graduated with honors, and the pride I felt watching him accept his diploma made every sacrificed hour worthwhile. When he needed help with the down payment on his first car, I withdrew funds from my retirement account without a second thought. Family takes care of family. That was the principle I lived by. Margaret's illness brought new challenges. Her treatment required specialized care at a hospital 2 hours away. I used all my vacation days, then negotiated a 4-day work week to accommodate her appointments. The medical bills mounted despite insurance, draining our savings. During one particularly difficult night in the hospital, Margaret had grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll keep the house," she whispered. "It holds our whole life story. And promise you'll make sure Thomas always has a home to return to." I had nodded, throat too tight for words. Both promises seemed natural extensions of the life we'd built together. After her funeral, I channeled my grief into completing projects Margaret had always wanted. I finished the garden pathway with mosaic tiles she had collected. I painted the dining room, the warm terracotta color she had admired in a magazine. The work kept me connected to her and gave purpose to empty days. My retirement arrived the following year. With my pension and Margaret's life insurance, I had planned modest travel and perhaps woodworking classes at the community college. Instead, Thomas and Samantha moved in, reshaping my quiet routines and gradually claiming ever larger portions of the home I had built with my own hands. Now, as dawn light filtered through the curtains Margaret had sewn, the full weight of yesterday's revelations settled around me. My daughter-in-law viewed me as a burden, and my son lacked the courage to contradict her. The promises I made to Margaret seemed impossible to keep simultaneously. How could I maintain a home for Thomas when he no longer respected me as its owner? I rose early, moving quietly through the still dark house. In the kitchen, I made coffee and sat at the table where our family had shared thousands of meals. From upstairs came the murmur of voices. Thomas and Samantha were awake. "We need to discuss care options soon," Samantha was saying, her voice carrying through the heating vent. "Yesterday proved he can't handle emotional situations appropriately." "He was upset because you blindsided him," Thomas replied, a hint of frustration in his tone. "These conversations are always difficult," she countered. "But practically speaking, this house is too large for him to maintain, and we could put the proceeds toward excellent elder care." "The house isn't even ours to sell," Thomas said weakly. "It will be eventually," Samantha replied. "And you're the only child. We should start getting the legal paperwork in order. My cousin's a real estate attorney who specializes in elder transitions." My hands tightened around my coffee mug. The casual way they discussed dismantling my life sent a chill through me. Elder transitions sounded like a euphemism for erasing my autonomy. In that moment, I realized a painful truth. The son I raised had become a stranger, and I was allowing it to happen through my own passivity. Margaret would be heartbroken to see Thomas treating me this way, but she would be equally disappointed if I failed to stand up for myself. The property I had poured 4 decades of sweat and love into was not just a house. It represented everything Margaret and I had built together, every sacrifice we had made for our family. I had promised her I would keep it, but surely she would understand that circumstances had changed fundamentally. As I sat contemplating this realization, a new thought formed with startling clarity. The house legally belonged to me alone. While I had always considered it Thomas's inheritance, that transfer was not inevitable or immediate. I still had choices. I still had power. For the first time since the barbecue, I felt something other than hurt and betrayal. A sense of possibility took root alongside my disappointment. I had spent my entire adult life ensuring my family's security and happiness. Perhaps it was finally time to secure my own. I rinsed my coffee cup and placed it in the dishwasher. Upstairs, the conversation continued, oblivious to my presence or my emerging resolve. I needed advice from someone who understood family dynamics from my perspective. I needed to talk to Frank. As I picked up my car keys, a strange lightness filled me. For months, perhaps years, I had felt increasingly irrelevant in my own home. But today, I would begin writing a new chapter for myself, one where I reclaimed the respect I deserved. The garage door opened with its familiar mechanical groan. I backed my car down the driveway, passing the happy birthday banner still hanging from yesterday's party. 67 years old and starting over. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would no longer be a passive observer in the dismantling of my life. Margaret would expect nothing less of me. Frank lived in a modest ranch-style home across town, where he'd moved after his wife Judith passed 2 years ago. Unlike me, he had downsized immediately, selling the large family home where they'd raised 3 daughters. "Too many ghosts," he'd explained at the time. "I need a fresh start." I found him in his meticulously maintained vegetable garden, a wide-brimmed hat shielding his face from the morning sunday. He straightened when he saw me, concern immediately crossing his weathered features. "You look like you haven't slept," he observed, wiping soil from his hands. "Come inside. I've got coffee brewing." Frank's kitchen was simple but functional, decorated with candid photos of his grandchildren and daughters. He poured 2 mugs of coffee and added cream to mine without asking, remembering how I took it. "Yesterday was worse than it looked," I began, cupping the warm mug between my palms. "This morning I overheard them discussing elder care options and selling my house." Frank's expression darkened. "Without consulting you? In your own home?" "They seem to think my opinion is a formality," I replied, the words still bitter on my tongue. "Samantha mentioned getting paperwork in order for what she called elder transitions. Sounds like they're planning your exit before you're ready to leave," Frank said bluntly. "My daughter Victoria tried something similar after Judith died, suddenly showing up with brochures for retirement communities, offering to help with my finances." I looked up sharply. "You never mentioned this. What did you do?" A smile spread across Frank's face. mischievous and satisfied. I reminded her who still controlled the family trust. Then I took a 3-week cruise to Alaska and didn't tell her until I got back. For the first time in days, I laughed genuinely. That sounds liberating. It was necessary, Frank corrected. Victoria needed to understand boundaries. She's much more respectful now that she knows I won't be manipulated. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Frank shared his experiences navigating family expectations as a widower, including the difficult conversations with his children about maintaining his independence. His approach balanced firmness with family connection, establishing clear boundaries without severing relationships. "Have you considered what you want, Aaron?" he finally asked. "Not what you promised Margaret. Not what Thomas expects. What do you want for this chapter of your life?" The question caught me off guard. For so long, my decisions had revolved around family obligations and Margaret's wishes. What did I want for myself? "I want respect," I said slowly. "I want to live somewhere that feels like mine again. I want peace." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe it's time to make some changes." As I drove home, his parting advice echoed in my mind. Don't react out of anger. Plan carefully. Remember, you have more power than they think. The next morning, I called Patricia Reynolds, a financial advisor who had helped manage my retirement portfolio for years. She agreed to meet that afternoon. Patricia's office projected competence and discretion, with its polished wooden furniture and tasteful artwork. At 65, she had repeatedly delayed her own retirement, saying she enjoyed helping clients too much to stop. "Aaron, good to see you." She greeted me warmly. "How can I help today?" I explained my situation concisely, including Thomas and Samantha's apparent plans. Patricia listened without interruption, taking occasional notes. "First," she said when I finished, "let me assure you that your financial situation is quite solid. Your pension, Social Security, and investments provide sustainable income. You're not dependent on the house's value for security." This confirmation bolstered my confidence. If I decided to sell the house, what would that look like financially? Patricia ran several projections on her computer, considering tax implications and reinvestment options. "The neighborhood has appreciated significantly," she noted. "Based on recent comparable sales, your property could sell for 3 to 4 times what you originally paid, even accounting for inflation." The figure she mentioned stunned me. While I knew property values had increased, I hadn't realized the magnitude. That would be enough to purchase something smaller outright and still add to my investments? "Absolutely," Patricia confirmed. "You could buy a very nice, smaller home or condo with cash and still strengthen your portfolio. From a purely financial perspective, downsizing makes excellent sense." She recommended consulting a real estate professional for a more precise valuation and suggested I speak with my attorney about how selling might affect my estate planning. "Whatever you decide, do it because it serves your goals, not as a reaction to family pressure," she advised. The following day, I contacted Linda Morales, a realtor who specialized in homes in my neighborhood. Unlike the slick, aggressive agents who regularly left flyers in my mailbox, Linda had a reputation for discretion and personalized service. "I'm not definitely selling," I explained during our initial phone conversation. "I need information to make an informed decision." "Understood," Linda replied. "Why don't I come by tomorrow to walk through the property? We can discuss options without any commitment." I arranged for her to visit while Thomas and Samantha were at work. The last thing I needed was them discovering my exploratory steps and attempting to influence the process. Linda arrived promptly at 10 the next morning, professional in a simple blazer and carrying a tablet instead of flashy marketing materials. She walked through each room, taking notes and occasionally asking about renovations or updates. In the kitchen, she paused to admire the custom cabinets I had built. "You don't see craftsmanship like this in newer homes," she commented. "Buyers will appreciate these details." After completing her tour, we sat at the dining room table where she showed me comparable recent sales. "Based on your square footage, lot size, condition, and neighborhood, I would list at $825,000 with room to negotiate. The figure nearly made me spill my coffee. That's considerably more than I expected. Linda smiled. The market is extremely strong right now, especially for well-maintained older homes with character. Low inventory means motivated buyers are competing for properties like yours. She explained that if I decided to sell, she would recommend minimal staging and a quick timeline. In this market, we could potentially have multiple offers within days of listing. After Linda left, I sat in my workshop surrounded by the tools I'd collected over decades. The financial details were clearer now, but the emotional aspects remained complicated. Selling meant leaving behind the home where Margaret and I had built our life together. I ran my hand along the workbench where I'd taught Thomas to build his first birdhouse. Would selling be a betrayal of Margaret's wishes, or would she understand that circumstances had changed dramatically? That afternoon, I drove to Lakeview Terrace, a planned community for adults 55 and older about 20 miles from my current home. Unlike the institutional assisted living facilities in Samantha's brochures, Lakeview offered independent living in attractive condominiums with optional services available. The sales office was staffed by Carol Jenkins, a vibrant woman around my age who explained she had moved to Lakeview herself 3 years earlier after her husband died. I needed a fresh start without maintenance headaches, she explained, walking me through the community center with its fitness facilities, workshop, and social spaces. Here I have independence plus community. We toured a 2-bedroom unit with an open floor plan, modern kitchen, and covered patio overlooking a small lake. The space was bright and accessible without feeling institutional. We have 3 units available in this building, Carol mentioned. One is a corner unit with a slightly larger patio and western exposure for beautiful sunsets. The price was significantly less than what my house could sell for, even for the premium corner unit. I could purchase outright with no mortgage, substantially reducing my monthly expenses. As Carol showed me the workshop where residents could use professional-grade equipment for projects, I felt a stirring of excitement. The space was well-equipped, filled with natural light, and several residents were working on interesting projects. We have a woodworking club that meets weekly, Carol mentioned. Several former contractors and a furniture maker. They'd love your expertise. For the first time, I could envision a life beyond my current house, one with new connections and possibilities, rather than increasing marginalization. My final consultation was with James Chen, the attorney who had handled Margaret's estate and our will. His downtown office projected stability with its leather-bound law books and framed credentials. I need to understand my options regarding the house, I explained after summarizing recent events. James reviewed my documents carefully. The situation is straightforward from a legal perspective, he confirmed. The house is solely in your name. You have complete authority to sell if you choose. And Thomas's inheritance? I asked. Your will currently leaves everything equally divided between Thomas and 3 charities Margaret supported. You can modify those terms at any time, James explained. Some clients in similar situations have established trusts with specific conditions rather than outright inheritance. He outlined several options, including a potential life insurance policy that could provide for Thomas while allowing me to use the house proceeds for my own needs. Whatever you decide, James advised, document everything. If family tension exists, clear records protect everyone. By the end of the week, I had gathered enough information to make an informed decision. Saturday morning, I sat at my desk with a legal pad, listing pros and cons of selling versus staying. The financial and practical advantages of selling were clear. The emotional aspects were more complex. What finally tipped the balance was remembering Margaret's full request. Keep the house and make sure Thomas always has a home to return to. I had focused on the first part while ignoring a crucial truth. Our house had stopped being a true home the moment respect and consideration vanished. A home isn't just physical structure, but the relationships within it. By that measure, what Thomas and Samantha had created was no longer the supportive family environment Margaret had valued. With renewed clarity, I made my decision. I would sell the house, purchase a new place at Lakeview Terrace, and restructure my estate planning. Thomas would eventually inherit financial assets, but I would no longer sacrifice my present comfort for a future he seemed eager to control. The next steps would require careful timing and discretion. Thomas and Samantha had shown their intentions clearly. Now I would show mine. Timing became critical once I made my decision. Thomas and Samantha had planned a weekend trip to visit her parents, providing the perfect opportunity to move forward without immediate confrontation. Linda had already lined up 2 serious buyers who were willing to view the property on short notice. The Friday morning after Thomas and Samantha departed, Linda arrived with the first potential buyers, a professional couple in their 40s with 2 teenage children. They walked through the house with appreciative comments about the craftsmanship and character. "The built-ins are original?" the husband asked, examining the living room bookshelves. "I built them myself in 1985, I replied with pride. "Solid oak, not veneer." The wife ran her hand along the kitchen countertop. "This space has been loved and cared for. You can feel it." They spent nearly 2 hours exploring every corner of the property, asking thoughtful questions about the neighborhood and maintenance history. Before leaving, they exchanged meaningful glances. "We'd like to make an offer," the husband said. "This is exactly what we've been searching for." The second showing that afternoon went similarly well. By evening, Linda called with news that both parties had submitted offers above asking price, with the first couple including a personal letter about how they would treasure the home's craftsmanship and character. $850,000, all cash, with flexible closing, Linda reported. They're pre-approved and can close in as little as 3 weeks. They've also agreed to a rent-back provision giving you up to 60 days to move out after closing. The offer exceeded my expectations, but the letter touched me deeply. Knowing the house would go to people who appreciated its details made the decision easier. The following Monday morning, I met with James to review and sign the purchase agreement. While there, we also updated my will and established a trust that would protect my assets while providing for Thomas in a structured way. This approach gives you control during your lifetime while ensuring your estate eventually benefits your son, James explained, as I signed the documents. But it prevents any premature attempts to access those assets. Next, I drove to Lakeview Terrace and signed a purchase agreement for the corner unit Carol had shown me. The timing aligned perfectly, with closing scheduled for 3 weeks after my house sale would finalize. "We're delighted to welcome you to our community," Carol said as we completed the paperwork. "The Woodworking Club meets Thursdays at 10 if you'd like to join them before you officially move in." With the major decisions formalized, I began the process of sorting through 40 years of accumulated possessions. Each evening after work hours, when I was confident Thomas and Samantha wouldn't unexpectedly return, I carefully evaluated items, creating keep, donate, and discard piles. Margaret's clothing and personal items had been distributed years earlier, but I still discovered treasures in forgotten corners. Her handwritten recipes tucked in cookbook pages, notes she had left in books, a pressed flower from our 25th anniversary trip. Each discovery brought both pain and comfort. I placed the most precious mementos in a special box that would come with me to my new home. Other items, while meaningful, seemed tied to the house itself. I photographed these carefully, creating a digital archive of memories that wouldn't require physical storage. Frank visited midweek, bringing dinner and helping me pack books from the home office. "How are you feeling about all this?" he asked as we wrapped Margaret's first edition poetry collections in protective paper. "Lighter than I expected," I admitted. "There's sadness, of course, but also a sense of taking control again." "Thomas still doesn't know?" Frank inquired, carefully placing books in a storage container. "They returned Sunday evening." "I'll tell them then," I replied. "Everything will be signed and legally binding by that point." Frank nodded approvingly. "Smart approach. No chance for interference." On Thursday, I visited the Lakeview workshop and met several future neighbors. Walter, a retired cabinet maker, showed me his current project, an intricate jewelry box with dovetail joints. We could use someone with construction experience, he commented. Most of us are hobbyists, not professionals like you. For the first time in months, I felt valued for my knowledge rather than defined by my age. These men and women saw me as a peer with valuable skills to contribute, not as a burden to be managed. By Sunday afternoon, I had packed my essential belongings, arranged for short-term storage of items I wanted to keep, and donated 3 truckloads of furniture and household goods to the Veterans Support Center. The house looked noticeably emptier, but still functional. I had deliberately left Thomas and Samantha's spaces untouched. This wasn't about inconveniencing them, but about reclaiming my autonomy. I heard their car pull into the driveway at 6:30 that evening. Taking a deep breath, I prepared for the conversation I had rehearsed countless times over the past week. "Dad? Why is the living room so empty?" Thomas called as they entered, confusion evident in his voice. I stepped from the kitchen, calm and resolute. "We need to talk. Please sit down." Samantha immediately noticed my serious expression. "Is everything okay? Are you sick?" "I'm perfectly healthy," I assured them, gesturing toward the dining room table. "But some changes are coming that you need to be aware of." They exchanged worried glances before sitting. I remained standing, a subtle shift in our usual power dynamic. "I've sold the house," I stated simply. "Closing is in 3 weeks." The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Samantha recovered first. "That's impossible," she declared. "You can't make a decision like that without consulting us." "Actually, I can, and did," I replied evenly. "The house is solely in my name. The sale is legally binding, with contracts signed and deposits transferred." Thomas finally found his voice. "But why? Where will you go? Where will we go?" "I've purchased a condo at Lakeview Terrace," I explained. "As for your living arrangements, you have 30 days to find a new place." Samantha's face flushed with anger. "This is about the barbecue, isn't it? You're punishing us for one comment taken out of context." "This isn't punishment," I corrected. "It's a natural consequence. When you treat someone as a burden rather than family, you shouldn't be surprised when they no longer prioritize your convenience." "Dad," Thomas pleaded, "we never meant to make you feel unwelcome. This is your home." "Was my home?" I clarified. "A home requires mutual respect. That's been missing for quite some time." Samantha stood abruptly, eyes flashing. "You can't do this to us. We have rights. As tenants without a lease, you have exactly the rights I've offered." 30 days notice, I stated, maintaining my composure. "I've consulted an attorney to confirm this." "Thomas, are you going to let him destroy our future like this?" Samantha demanded, turning to my son. Thomas looked torn, his expression cycling through shock, anger, and confusion. "The house was supposed to be my inheritance," he said quietly. "Plans change," I replied. "Just as your plans for my future changed without my input." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "You heard us talking about elder transitions and selling my house out from under me?" "Yes, I heard everything." Samantha paced the room, gesticulating wildly. "This is insane. Where are we supposed to go with housing prices what they are? We were saving for our own place." "For 3 years," I noted. "Yet you found money for 2 European vacations and a new car. Your priorities were clear, just not to me until recently." The argument continued for nearly an hour. Samantha cycled through anger, manipulation, and finally tears. Thomas seemed genuinely shocked by the abruptness of the change, but gradually appeared to recognize the justice in my decision. "We really thought we were considering your best interests," he offered weakly. "By discussing my future as if I had no say in it?" I questioned. "That's not consideration, Thomas. That's control." Eventually, exhaustion tempered the emotional intensity. I outlined the practical details, their timeline for finding new housing, which items in the house belong to them versus me, and the moving schedule. "I'll be staying at a hotel during the final week before closing," I explained. "You'll have privacy to pack your belongings without me hovering." "A hotel? That's unnecessary," Thomas protested. "It's my preference," I stated firmly. This transition will be easier with some space between us." As the conversation wound down, Samantha retreated upstairs without further comment. Thomas lingered in the dining room, looking suddenly very young and uncertain. "Dad, I never wanted you to feel pushed out," he said softly. "I believe you," I replied, allowing some warmth back into my voice. "But intentions matter less than actions. You allowed this situation to develop by remaining silent when you should have spoken up." He nodded, accepting the criticism. "What happens to us now? As family, I mean." The question touched me unexpectedly. Despite everything, he was still my son, and I still loved him. "That depends on what we both choose going forward," I answered honestly. "Family relationships can heal, but they require effort from all sides." Thomas nodded slowly, before heading upstairs to join Samantha. I heard their muffled voices well into the night, occasionally rising in volume before subsiding again. The following morning, Thomas left early for work without speaking to me. Samantha remained in their room until nearly noon, emerging only to announce that they would be staying with her sister temporarily while apartment hunting. "We'll be out by the weekend," she stated flatly. "I hope you're satisfied with destroying this family." I let the accusation pass without response. Nothing would be gained by pointing out that their actions, not mine, had fractured our family bonds first. By Thursday, they had packed most of their belongings. Thomas rented a storage unit for furniture they couldn't accommodate in the temporary housing. Throughout the process, he maintained a quiet, subdued demeanor, while Samantha alternated between icy silence and passive-aggressive comments. On Saturday morning, Thomas loaded the last of their possessions into a rented moving truck. As he prepared to leave, he paused on the front porch where I sat, watching. "I understand why you did this," he said softly. "I'm not saying I agree with how you did it, but I understand why." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. Perhaps that was all I could expect for now. "Take care of yourself, Thomas," I replied. "And remember that actions have consequences, both mine and yours." He nodded once before climbing into the truck. Samantha was already seated in the passenger side, deliberately looking straight ahead rather than at me. As they drove away, I expected to feel vindicated, or perhaps sad. Instead, I experienced a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the confrontation was over, regret that it had been necessary, and hope that this painful lesson might eventually lead to healthier family dynamics. The sold sign in the front yard caught the morning sunlight, symbolizing not just a real estate transaction, but a personal transformation. At 67, I had reclaimed control of my life's direction. Whatever came next would be on my terms, not determined by others' expectations. I returned to the increasingly empty house, my footsteps echoing slightly in the hallway. 3 more weeks, and this chapter would close completely. The thought brought both melancholy and anticipation for the fresh start awaiting me. The closing process went smoothly, completed in a lawyer's office downtown with minimal fanfare. I signed dozens of documents, received a cashier's check for an amount that still seemed surreal, and handed over the keys that had been in my possession for 4 decades. "Congratulations," the young couple who purchased the house said warmly. "We promise to care for it as lovingly as you have." "That's all I could ask for," I replied, surprised by the emotional tightness in my throat. "The house deserves a family who appreciates it." I had already moved into a short-term rental apartment while waiting for my Lakeview Terrace condo closing. The sparse, impersonal space felt transitional in every sense, a neutral zone between my past life and whatever came next. During those 3 weeks, I heard nothing from Thomas or Samantha. Frank kept me company frequently, helping me adjust to this period of limbo and reassuring me that I had made the right decision. "Change is always uncomfortable," he observed as we shared dinner at a local restaurant. "But necessary discomfort leads to growth." The condo closing arrived with less emotional weight than the house sale. The transaction felt hopeful rather than bittersweet, a beginning rather than an ending. Carol greeted me with a welcome basket and introduced me to several neighbors who helped carry my modest collection of boxes into the new space. "The woodworking club meets tomorrow," she reminded me. Walter's especially eager to show you their current group project. That first night in my new home, I sat on the patio watching sunset colors reflect across the lake. The space felt manageable, the community welcoming, and for the first time in years, I experienced a profound sense of being exactly where I belonged. I unpacked methodically over the following days, arranging my remaining possessions in ways that honored their history while fitting my new circumstances. Margaret's favorite reading chair claimed the corner with the best natural light. Family photos, carefully curated to include mostly happy memories, adorned a single wall rather than dominating every surface. The woodworking club welcomed me enthusiastically, immediately incorporating me into their ongoing project building toys for the children's hospital. Walter introduced me to techniques I hadn't previously mastered, while I shared construction shortcuts from my professional experience. "You're a godsend," he declared after I solved a particularly challenging joinery problem. "We've been stuck on this design for weeks." Beyond the workshop, I discovered other community activities that appealed to my interests. A twice-weekly fishing group gathered at the lake's edge before dawn. A photography club conducted monthly excursions to capture landscape images. A volunteer corps helped maintain community gardens and organized regular cleanups at nearby parks. Gradually, my calendar filled with meaningful activities and new friendships. Each morning brought purpose, rather than the vague sense of intrusion I had experienced in my final months at the house. 3 weeks after moving in, my phone rang with Thomas's number on the screen. I hesitated briefly before answering. "Dad?" His voice sounded strained. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Of course," I replied, settling into a chair on my patio. "How are you?" "Managing," he answered vaguely. "We found an apartment, but the rent is nearly twice what we budgeted. The housing market is brutal right now." I made a non-committal sound, unwilling to offer financial assistance that would undermine the lesson this experience needed to teach. "Samantha's parents refused to help us," he continued. "They said we're adults who should have planned better." "That seems reasonable," I observed neutrally. A long silence followed before Thomas spoke again. "I miss you, Dad. Things ended badly, and I regret that." The simple admission touched me more than I expected. "I miss you too, son. But I don't regret the changes I made." "I understand that now," he said quietly. "It was your house, your life. We overstepped." We talked for nearly an hour, carefully navigating the raw emotions still lingering between us. Thomas explained that he and Samantha were struggling to adjust to their reduced circumstances, having never realized how much they had benefited from living rent-free in my home. "Samantha's still angry," he admitted. "She blames you entirely and refuses to acknowledge her role in what happened." "That's her choice," I replied. "But it doesn't have to determine your choices." "What does that mean?" he asked hesitantly. "It means you can maintain a relationship with me independent of her feelings," I explained. "Adult relationships sometimes require that kind of boundary." The conversation ended with tentative plans for Thomas to visit my new home the following month. I felt cautiously optimistic about rebuilding our connection, though realistic about the challenges ahead. Life at Lakeview continued to exceed my expectations. I joined the community council, offering my construction expertise for maintenance decisions. My corner unit became a gathering place for neighbors who enjoyed evening card games and discussions, ranging from politics to gardening techniques. One evening, while hosting such a gathering, I met Barbara Collins, a widow who had moved to Lakeview 6 months earlier. At 65, she maintained the vitality and curiosity of someone much younger, with silver-streaked dark hair and animated green eyes. "Aaron builds the most beautiful birdhouses," Walter informed her, as they examined my latest creation displayed on the bookshelf. "My late husband was an avid birder," Barbara replied, running her finger along the cedar roof. "He would have appreciated this craftsmanship." Something in her expression, a familiar blend of fond remembrance without overwhelming grief, resonated deeply with me. We found ourselves still talking long after other guests had departed, sharing stories of our previous lives and discoveries at Lakeview. "Would you like to join me for the nature photography walk tomorrow?" I asked as she prepared to leave. The group is documenting seasonal changes around the lake. Her smile lit up her entire face. I'd enjoy that very much. Our friendship developed naturally over the following weeks. Barbara had been an elementary school principal before retirement, with a no-nonsense approach to problems and a deeply compassionate heart. We discovered shared interests in classical music, historical documentaries, and trying cuisines from around the world. Margaret would have liked you, I told Barbara one evening as we shared dinner at a Thai restaurant in town. She always said I needed more cultural expansion. Barbara's eyes crinkled with her smile. My Robert would have appreciated your practicality. He could design beautiful gardens, but couldn't fix a leaking faucet to save his life. Through Frank, I occasionally received updates about Thomas and Samantha. Their financial struggles continued, complicated by unexpected car repairs, and Samantha's dissatisfaction with their apartment's location. Thomas called me yesterday, Frank reported during one of our regular coffee meetings. He asked if I thought you might consider a loan to help them with a down payment on a condo. What did you tell him? I asked, already knowing my answer would be negative. That he should focus on rebuilding your relationship before approaching you about money, Frank replied. I think he understood. Thomas's scheduled visit arrived on a perfect autumn Saturday. I had mixed emotions as I waited for him, uncertain whether this represented genuine reconciliation or another attempt to gain financial assistance. He arrived alone, a significant choice given Samantha's continued hostility. As I showed him around my new community, his initial awkwardness gradually dissolved. This place suits you, he observed as we walked along the lakeshore. You seem happier. I am, I confirmed. I've found purpose and community here. Over lunch at the community cafe, Thomas shared his own challenges with unexpected candor. Samantha and I are struggling, not just financially, but as a couple. She expected certain things from our marriage that haven't materialized. Including my house? I suggested gently. He nodded, looking ashamed. She had plans for renovating it completely. Once, he trailed off. Once I was out of the picture, I finished for him. It sounds terrible saying it out loud, he admitted. But yes, that was the unspoken expectation. For the first time, Thomas seemed to fully recognize the inappropriate nature of their assumptions. I'm sorry, Dad. I got caught up in Samantha's vision and forgot the values you and Mom taught me. The simple apology meant more than any elaborate explanation could have. Thank you for saying that, Thomas. It matters. Before leaving, he asked if he could visit again the following month, this time to join one of my woodworking sessions. I miss building things with you, he said. Those are some of my best childhood memories. I'd like that, I replied, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. As autumn progressed into winter, my new life continued to flourish. Barbara and I grew closer, our friendship evolving into something deeper that neither of us had expected at this stage of life. You make me laugh, she told me one evening as we watched snow falling outside my living room window. I'd forgotten how important that island. Thomas visited regularly, always alone, gradually rebuilding our relationship through shared activities and honest conversations. He eventually confided that he and Samantha had entered marriage counseling, with uncertain results. She still blames you for our problems, he explained. But our therapist is helping her see that our expectations weren't realistic or fair. By spring, I had been at Lakeview for nearly a year. The decision that had once seemed so radical now felt like the most natural path imaginable. My smaller space contained everything I truly needed, while the community provided connections that enriched every day. Barbara and I had acknowledged our growing feelings for each other, entering a relationship that brought unexpected joy to both our lives. Second chances are rare gifts, she observed as we planned a summer road trip together. Thomas and Samantha ultimately separated, a development that saddened but didn't surprise me. She couldn't accept the new reality, Thomas explained during one of his visits. Everything became about what she'd lost, rather than what we could build together. Through all these changes, I sometimes reflected on that fateful barbecue and Samantha's cutting words. Her attempt to diminish me had instead catalyzed a transformation I might otherwise have postponed indefinitely. Sometimes, the most painful moments become unexpected doorways to growth. By challenging my passivity, Samantha had inadvertently pushed me toward a life more authentic and fulfilling than I could have imagined. 18 months after moving to Lakeview Terrace, I hosted a small dinner party to celebrate my 69th birthday. Barbara had moved into the condo across the hall 6 months earlier, though we maintained separate residences to preserve our independence while enjoying our deepening relationship. She arrived early to help prepare, bringing fresh flowers for the table and her signature apple tart for dessert. Frank called to confirm he and Judith are bringing the wine, she reported, arranging sunflowers in a vase. "And Thomas?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Barbara squeezed my shoulder gently. "He texted that he's on his way, driving separately from the others." Thomas had remained a regular presence in my life, despite his divorce from Samantha finalized 3 months earlier. Our relationship had gradually strengthened through honest conversations and shared activities, though certain topics remained tender. The doorbell rang at precisely 6 o'clock. Frank and Judith entered bearing wine bottles and warm hugs, followed by Walter and his wife Eleanor from the woodworking club. "Happy birthday, my friend," Frank declared, clapping me on the shoulder. "69 looks good on you." We gathered in the living room, conversation flowing easily among people who had become my chosen family. Barbara served appetizers while I mixed drinks, our movements around each other comfortable and synchronized. The doorbell rang again at 6:30. I opened it to find Thomas standing there, looking nervous but determined. "Sorry I'm late," he said, handing me a carefully wrapped package. Traffic was heavier than I expected. I embraced him warmly. "You're right on time. Come meet everyone." The evening progressed pleasantly, with stories and laughter filling my condo. Thomas initially seemed reserved, but gradually relaxed, as the group welcomed him without judgment. During dinner, he surprised me by asking thoughtful questions about various community projects I had mentioned in our conversations. "The children's hospital playroom renovation sounds impressive," he commented. "Is there any way non-residents can volunteer? I've been looking for meaningful community involvement." Walter immediately launched into explanation of the project's next phase, offering to sponsor Thomas's participation. "We could use someone with construction knowledge," he noted. "Aaron tells us you learned from the best." Later, as Barbara and Judith cleared dishes, Thomas asked if we could step onto the patio for a private conversation. The evening air carried the scent of approaching autumn, cool but not uncomfortable. "I have something important to tell you," he began, his expression serious. "I've been offered a job in Denver. It's a significant promotion, heading their marketing department." My heart sank at the thought of geographic distance, undoing our carefully rebuilt connection. "That's a wonderful opportunity," I managed. "When would you start?" "That's what I wanted to discuss," Thomas replied. "I'm considering declining the offer." "Because of me?" I asked, concerned I had somehow become an obstacle to his career advancement. Thomas shook his head. "Not exactly. The past year has helped me reassess my priorities. Career advancement matters less to me now than maintaining important relationships." His words touched me deeply. "I appreciate that more than I can express, but I don't want to hold you back." "You're not," he assured me, "but I wanted your perspective before deciding." We talked for nearly an hour, weighing professional opportunities against personal considerations. I shared my experience prioritizing career during Thomas's childhood, including regrets about missed moments I could never reclaim. "There's no perfect answer," I concluded. "But at the end of life, relationships matter more than professional achievements. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take the job, just that you should recognize what you're gaining and losing either way." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "That helps clarify things. Thank you." When we rejoined the party, Barbara had served her apple tart with coffee. The conversation had turned to upcoming holiday celebrations, with suggestions for a community Thanksgiving dinner. "Thomas should join us," Walter declared. "We'll have plenty of room at the community center." The casual inclusion of my son in future plans warmed me immensely. These people had become my family of choice, and their acceptance of Thomas represented healing I hadn't dared hope for. As guests departed later that evening, Thomas lingered behind. "There's something else I wanted to discuss," he said once we were alone. From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "I found this while clearing out my storage unit last week." Inside was Margaret's engagement ring, a modest diamond in a vintage setting that had belonged to her grandmother. "Mom gave this to me before she died," Thomas explained. "She said I should use it when I found the right person." Obviously, that wasn't Samantha. I touched the ring gently, memories flooding back. "She never told me she gave this to you. She wanted it to be a surprise whenever the time came," Thomas replied. "But I've been thinking about what to do with it now." He closed the box carefully. "I'd like you to have it back. Maybe Barbara would appreciate having something of Mom's, a connection between the women who've loved you." The thoughtfulness of this gesture nearly overwhelmed me. "Thomas, that's incredibly generous, but your mother intended it for your future." He shook his head firmly. "My future looks different now, and I've learned from watching you this past year that new beginnings deserve their own symbols." I accepted the ring box, deeply moved by his maturity and consideration. "Thank you. I'll think carefully about the right moment, if that moment comes." After Thomas left, I sat alone in my living room, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months. From the humiliation of that barbecue to this evening of warmth and reconciliation seemed an almost impossible transformation. The painful words Samantha had spoken had ultimately triggered not my decline but my rebirth. By attempting to diminish me, she had instead catalyzed my reclamation of personal power and purpose. The house I had built with Margaret remained important in my heart, but I now understood that its physical structure had never been what mattered most. The values it represented, the love it contained, the respect it fostered, those elements lived on in my new home and relationships. Thomas had learned difficult but necessary lessons about respect and consequences. Our relationship now stood on firmer ground, built on mutual understanding rather than obligation or expectation. Barbara had brought unexpected joy to my life, proving that love remains possible at any age when approached with honesty and emotional courage. The community at Lakeview provided purpose through shared projects and genuine connections with people who valued my contributions. As I prepared for bed, I placed Margaret's ring in my bedside drawer, not yet certain of its future but grateful for its return. Whatever came next, I faced it with confidence rather than apprehension. At nearly 70, I had discovered that life continues to offer possibilities for growth and joy when we remain open to change. The following morning, I joined the fishing group at dawn, watching sunlight spread across the lake's surface. Walter handed me a cup of coffee from his thermos, and we stood in companionable silence as birds began their morning songs. "Good birthday?" he asked eventually. "One of the best," I replied truthfully. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Life offers no guarantees about how others will treat us. Family relationships, despite blood connections, require the same fundamental respect as any other relationship. When that respect disappears, sometimes the healthiest response is to create distance and establish clear boundaries. My journey taught me that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, but necessary for genuine relationships to flourish. True family, whether related by blood or choice, honors your autonomy and dignity rather than seeing you as a means to their ends. Most importantly, I learned that new chapters can begin at any age. The courage to change direction, when a path no longer serves you, creates possibilities that remaining stuck never could. If you've ever faced family disrespect or felt taken for granted, know that you deserve better. Your age doesn't determine your value, and your past doesn't have to dictate your future. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself, and ultimately for others, is to say enough and create a life that honors your worth. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately led to unexpected happiness? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life lessons. Remember, it's never too late to start a new chapter. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you find the courage to create the life you truly deserve.